I realized that I should give a little maybe disclaimer, warn you perhaps, of two faux pas that I've got in my presentation. I'm a technologist, visualization specialist, and you'd expect some flashy animations or pictures, and I don't think I've got one in my presentation. Also, I'm a presenter. Most of you guys don't know me from Adam, right? And I want you to like me and listen. And I actually say something potentially insulting here. But I'm an engineer, so there's some level of expectation on social awkwardness. So I'm going to proceed as if it doesn't matter. Over the next 12 or so minutes, you're going to have an opportunity to benefit from about 12 years of my career. And I'm going to be focusing on the last 4 of my career where there was a shift to model-based approaches. I'm going to start with where I'm at now, how I got there, and then I'm going to finish by sharing with you a few of the challenges, lesson learns, and benefits. So 12 years ago, I was the lead CAD technician on the Marquette Interchange project, 2002. It was the largest transportation project in the state of Wisconsin to date. To give you a sense of its size, the final deliverable plans, just the plans, 11 by 17 plan sets, and the net weight was about 200 pounds for just the final deliverables. And if you would stack them up from the ground, they were about 3.5 feet from the ground. Now, that's not the specs, that's not the estimates, that's not all the copies that were made of them. That's just the total of all of the final plans. Now, that's about 1,000 pages of stamped plans. By 2006, now the start of the north-south corridor, the Mitchell Interchange project, I had foregone. Then we've moved past the $17,000 it took to print and to transport those final designs, and that was replaced by uploading electronic PDF files. It wasn't until the end of that final design project that I was asked by Lance, among others, to compile and translate 3D models in an effort to do BIM, right? Thus began my BIM journey of discovery and evangelizing to the masses, which has led me to where I am now. Here I stand, and I tell you, with all due respect, that I no longer care what you think of all this. Now, I know how that can sound, a bit harsh, right? Something that needs a little bit of explaining. Well, what's a more appropriate way for a technologist and visualization specialist to explain this than with a hand-sketched cartoon? The X-BIM pusher. The X-BIM pusher is a cartoon that outlines my journey across Mount Delta, from Flatville to Modelopolis, by Christopher Johnson. It all started with encouragements that the future was at hand, just a push past the Delta to the land of efficiency and connectivity. In 2002, the first year I was asked to present what I had discovered, I felt a bit like someone pushing the BIM bus uphill while making sales pitches to audiences with crossed arms who wanted to know, what's the return on investment? It's now been 2 years since I first spoke at this annual meeting, and while the calls for ROIs can still be heard from the crowd, I've passed the point of needing to push the issue any longer. I stopped caring. So let me back up and give you a picture of how I've come to this point over the last few years. It's a journey of having the great opportunity to work on some of the largest projects in the state of Wisconsin, these mega projects, over the last 4 years. Now, as you heard earlier, Wisconsin is one of 13 states that's seen as a national leader in the implementation of model-based technologies. In June of 2009, there was an announcement of a BIM implementation plan in Wisconsin. So I'll zoom in now in this timeline of model-based initiatives, and we'll look at 2010, 2011. After receiving a request to do BIM a few months prior, one of the first initiatives I worked on was a pilot project of the Mitchell Interchange that you can see there about the middle of 2010. A couple months later, discussions about including modeling in the scope for the next mega project were already underway. You can see there existing modeling efforts were defined, accomplished, and then finally documented. Then the proposed components likewise. Here's 2011, 2012. Things really started picking up from there. And 2012 proved to be a busy year for me with model-based activities. I started presenting to our project teams and was invited here to speak in 2012 at the annual meeting. Clash detection, that you can see there with red triangles at the top, which began as experimental reviews, became common practice for all of the projects. One of the most telling signs about how these model-based initiatives were gaining momentum was with what I've got highlighted there in yellow, which is the unexpected model-based initiatives. And this has to do with the unexpected ways that the models were being utilized by the design teams. And these were initiatives that first were not expected, but once the designers had seen and had the opportunity to use their designs in collaboration with others, questions started coming to the surface. 2012 and 2013. By the following year, more and more design teams were coming on board with the benefit of 3D modeling. What was at first foreign became familiar. And design teams no longer needed me to help them coordinate and collaborate in these model-based efforts. Now, there are far more than just these highlighted initiatives that I've got shown here, of the unexpected ones. And that's my point. They're no longer initiatives. These are expectations. These are expectations that contracts are being created for, that scoping language is being expected and asked of. I'm no longer pushing the bus. I'm now along for the ride. I'll turn my attention to a few of the challenges then. I'll distill these things into something you could take away with you. The lights that I've got shown reflect relative importance or value, significance. So here I'm showing the relative large significance of it's all in your head to the relative small significance of having the right stuff. Let me start with what I mean by it's all in your head. The current thinking and culture of the industry. This is everyone involved in delivering the project. Everyone. This is something that's slow to change. It's relatively not easily influenced, but has the most significant effect on utilizing a model-based approach. This paradigm shift challenges some of the core ways that transportation projects are thought about and are therefore organized and executed. Okay, I think this is important, so I want to touch on this again. The current thinking and culture of the industry affects the core way that transportation projects are thought about and therefore organized and executed. The next challenge that's of one notch down in significance is commitment issues, the degree to which a model-based approach is utilized. Now, this is essentially how all in a project goes with model-based. And I think it's fair to say that most high-level decision makers who can influence how all in a project can go have commitment issues. Now, I don't discredit the legitimacy of these concerns. It makes sense. But what I've experienced firsthand, and after speaking to dozens of people who have testified to the same thing, this isn't something that you can sprinkle on top of a project and expect large gains from. If you want a very fruitful crop, you've got to buy the entire field. Having the right stuff, the labor and technology resources needed. This I would rate as the least significant. Now, these are usually the first questions that get asked. What software are you using? Who did you hire to do the work, right? And I admit this is always a facet because it's where the rubber hits the road. But it's just not as important as it's made out to be, period. If you build it, they will come. I hope that's not trademarked and I can say that okay. Resources are the cart behind the model-based culture that a project team commits to. I'll say that again. Resources are the cart behind the model-based culture that a project team commits to. Okay, I'll touch on some lessons learned. These are 3 of them. Role of automation, clash job recipes, and clash review timing. So I've got to admit to you that I'm a tool maker by trade. I love developing, a hacker, coder, and this is my forte. I've developed an application that's allowed me to track the usage of some of these tools, and I've estimated over 7,000 man-hours saved. As you can see, there's a breakdown of only the top 19 tools of 295 that are available to the project teams that I support. Project Toolbox is the name of the solution I've developed to connect users to all of the various tools I've created and collected over the years. Those of you out there who are familiar with CAD applications, GIS applications even, recognize that if there's custom tools that are offered, a couple common ways that those are offered to a project team is through a drop-down menu, right? You can have a little tree approach, or through even a nicer looking set of toolbars with icons on them. And what happens for me, and I'm sure what happens for you, is even after looking at 5, 10 of these listed with just the names to go off of, it becomes overwhelming to know what the tools are in the project toolbox. So project toolbox by the numbers, it's one searchable application with over 3 years of usage collected, used by 100 project users and over 200 custom tools. Okay, I want to quickly show you a handful of slides that display some of the metrics I've collected over the past 3 years of usage. This shows how many users are using the toolbox over time. And you can see what was a slow start became something akin to a critical mass until we're now all of the project team has used this at some point. This shows the metrics of how many users are using daily. And it's interesting to note that it took 1.5 to 2 years from its start for it to really gain the momentum that you see here. This shows how frequently users are using, in which it's going up. And this shows the sustained use over time. Now, this picture really drives the point home. Almost all of these are tools that wouldn't have been used because they weren't aware or have access to by the project team. And some of these are tools that enable modeling to happen at a speed that otherwise wouldn't have been able to be used within the deliverable time frame. Lessons learned, clash job recipes. These are the ingredient lists of one set of elements being compared to another. What I show here are 8 staple recipes that have been developed over time by the project team. Now, other recipes, as I call them, are created on a project-by-project basis, but what was found to be helpful is to identify a set of 8 staple recipes that initiate all clash jobs, and then we can build off of them from there. The next, clash review timing. This is something that I think is counterintuitive, and we had to learn by experience. Our first attempt at a clash detection review meeting was a few weeks prior to a draft submittal. The thinking was to give the designers enough time to address the changes prior to submittal. It makes sense. What we found was that many of the clashes that we had taken the time and effort to do prior to the review meeting had already been identified and eliminated by the time the meeting happened, just using existing review processes. So what I just show there graphically is the taking advantage of the exponential rate of refinement efforts that go in just prior to, and this is only 1 or 2 weeks we're talking about. And lastly, I'll quickly hit 3 benefits: eliminating conflicts, enabling exploration, and facilitating coordination. The value attained from detecting conflicts prior to construction. While this was the only expectation and thing that we planned for going into it, it was actually something that was the least valuable benefit. Enabling exploration. This is the value of enabling the design teams to ask previously unexpected questions. This was of even greater importance. And this happened when the designers now saw their designs in the same space as others' designs, and now asked questions that they previously didn't know how to ask, or that could be asked. And lastly, facilitating coordination. This was the highest value that we saw on the projects. And that's the value of creating additional opportunities for each design team to coordinate with one another. So a lot of times this was either the clash detection review process or just the fact that they now saw their models in the same space. One anecdote that I'd share is the utility team now seeing the 3-dimensional model of the roadways and the existing water mains. When they sent the 1078 plans to the municipalities, they didn't hear anything back of needing for further collaboration. Well, after seeing the ability and asking, can we now put a 6-foot envelope over the water mains and see if any of them conflict with the subgrade in the pavement? The answer was yes, by dozens. And that then initiated conversations further, whether it was over 2D plans or email correspondences, that otherwise wouldn't have happened. So thanks for putting up with my socially awkward engineering faux pas.